This video will demonstrate the installation procedures for a B&D Wideline roller door. The components for a B&D Series 2 or Thermador Maxi may be different in appearance, however, the installation process is identical. Before you start, make sure that you have the correct tools to complete the installation. You'll need a power drill and bits, a file, a hacksaw, 2 step ladders, adhesive tape, marking pen, tape measure, Phillips head screwdriver, a socket set, spirit level, Stanley knife, water level, and 450mm pipe wrench. B&D roller doors are designed to be mounted behind the opening. Therefore, you'll need to measure and check the opening width, opening height, side room and headroom. You should also measure the opening to ensure you have the correct door size. As the door overlaps each side by 50 mils or more, the door should be 100 mils wider than the opening. A wider door can be fitted as long as additional side room and fixing is available. If the door is too narrow, the opening should be reduced by fitting jambs to the inside of the opening. The door will fit any opening height up to the marked door size. A door cannot be installed higher than its maximum size. However, it can be installed in a lower position, providing the door guides are cut to size. If the opening is too high, the door should be installed at the maximum door height position and the opening reduced. The door is supported on brackets above the opening at each end and requires headroom for the door to roll up in. You should refer to your dimension panel. Consequently, piers or door posts must continue up past the top of the opening to provide fixing for the support brackets. It is preferable that lintels be built flush with or slightly forward to the back of the door posts if possible. This avoids an excessive gap between the door and the lintel, while allowing sufficient working clearance to prevent the door rubbing against the back of the lintel. A minimum of 135 mils of side room is required behind the opening and should extend above the head to allow for bracket fixing. 195 mils is desirable. Side room on one side of 195 mils is required if a B&D controller door garage door opener is to be fitted now or in the future. The door must be installed in an absolutely level condition. If the opening is not level and square, appearances and/or side room requirements will be affected. Where jambs are out of plumb, extra side room or opening modifications may be required to allow the door guides to stand back from the opening edge. The floor should be level or recessed across the opening to avoid gaps. Ensure the opening is strong enough to support the door. Ensure that the surface where the door will be fitted is flush and smooth and the area behind the opening is free from any protrusions. When taking delivery of your B&D residential Wideline roller door, you should check that you have the following components. Remember that the Series 2 roller door and Thermador Maxi components may vary in appearance. Remove brackets, guides and bag of small parts from each end of the door roll. The standard fixings that come supplied with a B&D Wideline residential roller door are coach screws for attachments to timberwork. Remember that it is the installer's responsibility to ensure that the fixing method is sound. When deciding the fixing method, dynamic loads on door brackets as well as the door weight must be considered. For brackets, B&D recommends you use 10mm minimum bolt size masonry anchors, Dynabolts or similar. For the door guides, B&D recommend that you use the 40 by 8mm coach screws supplied with a good plastic masonry plug or suitable masonry anchors. Masonry blockwork should be properly filled and reinforced if brackets are to be mounted directly to blockwork with masonry anchors. Where the blockwork is not solidly filled but structurally sound, long bolts should be passed through the blockwork using suitable steel plates under bolt heads. Special consideration should be given to brick type and construction of wall to ensure satisfactory fixing. For example, welding detail if fixing to steel. Check floor and lintel levels and work from the lowest side or from the side with the least headroom. To install your brackets, you must first determine your headroom requirements. To determine the height that you must install the brackets above the lintel, go to your dimension panel. Go to the column headed E1 for normal headroom installation. If you have low or restricted headroom, look at the column in the dimension panel headed E2. If you have sufficient headroom and it is standard or unobstructed, measure down from the ceiling using dimension C1 on the dimension panel. If you have sufficient headroom but it is restricted or low, measure down from the obstruction using dimension C2 on the dimension panel. Now mark out the new line and treat it as the lintel line. You will need to allow for sufficient side clearance for the door curtain. Mark out one bracket. Wearing appropriate safety gear, drill and fix the bracket using the hardware provided. Using a water level or a straight edge and spirit level, transfer the position of the top of the first bracket arm to the opposite side of the opening. Now you can mark, drill and fix the second bracket. Remember that the brackets must be perfectly level for the door to operate correctly. Ensure the brackets are secure. If you have insufficient headroom and the brackets have to be placed above a marked lintel line, you may need to fit a false head or lintel to improve the appearance of the installation and to improve coverage. Make sure the door is the correct way round. The curtain always rolls down the rear of the opening. Carefully lift the door onto the brackets using a suitable lifting method to avoid damaging the curtain. Rest the axle on the cast iron saddle supplied with the door. Loosely secure the axle onto the saddle using the U-bolt, nuts and washers through the slots in the bracket arm. Before tightening the U-bolts, you must position the door to ensure the door overlaps the opening evenly on both sides and that the axle is positioned on the bracket arm slots as far forward as possible, while still allowing the bottom rail to pass the lintel when the door roll is rotated. Rotate both the door and the axle so that the bottom rail is level with the bracket arm. Now you can tighten the U-bolts. Make sure they are very tight, using the washers under the nuts to a torque of 40 Newton meters or 30 foot-pounds. If the axle is not securely clamped, the door will lose spring tension. Now you're ready to install the guides. The guides must be the correct length. It is easier to check the guide length prior to lifting the door onto the brackets. The top of the guide is to be level with the top of the bracket for preferred standard headroom fixing. For low headroom installations, make sure the top of the guide is above the bracket by dimension G in the dimension panel. If the guides require shortening, cut length from the bottom of the guide. Position the guides true and plumb at each side of the opening. Mark, drill and fix both guides, allowing 3 to 4 mil of working clearance between the door and the inside of each guide. To fix the guides, use the 10mm coach screws and washers supplied. For masonry applications, use suitable plastic plugs or other fixings to ensure satisfactory attachment. We do not recommend welding the guides to steelwork. Do not grease the guides. Grease will damage the nylon felt running strips and make the door heavier to operate. Check the top of the guide lead to ensure that the door does not make contact when rotated. If contact occurs, damage to the nylon could result. Ensure the axle is securely clamped and rotate the door approximately 2 complete turns in a forward direction. The amount of tension required for satisfactory operation may vary with individual doors, depending on their size. You will make the final adjustment later. Hold the door firmly, cut the bands and remove the protective packaging. Once the bands containing the door roll are cut, the door will have a strong tendency to rise and revolve. If uncontrolled, the rapidly unrolling door could cause damage or injury. Therefore, it must be securely held until the bottom rail stops are fitted. Chain wheel doors can be held in position by locking the chain in the chain clip attached to the left-hand guide. Cut the weather strip and feed the door down into the guides below the headstop. Fit the bottom rail stops using the self-locking nuts provided with the door. Allow the door to rise and to rest against the headstops. To fit the handle, use the screws and washers provided and fit to the pre-drilled holes. Now you are ready for the final adjustment on the door. Operate the door up and down a number of times to check it's operating smoothly. If the door is hard to operate in one direction, adjust the spring tension. If the door is hard to operate in both directions, check the guide clearances. Make sure the door is not jamming. Also, check the inside surfaces of the guides are clean and free of any oil film. Use a spirit cleaner if necessary. Polishing the inside surfaces of the guides will improve the operation. If the door is stiff to work and rattles over the lead-in at the top of the guides, or if the door is scraping in the guides, refer to your installation manual for troubleshooting tips. To install the centre lift lock, fit the faceplate to the outside of the door. To do this, fit the hooks onto the edge of the aperture and then slide the faceplate as far as possible. Attach the lock body to the faceplate from the inside using the countersunk screws supplied. Be sure not to over-tighten the screws. Measure and cut the locking bars to the correct length. Measure and mark 3 equally spaced distances between the lock and the outer locking bar retainer. Mark 2 positions on each side for the adhesive locking bar retainers. Slide the locking bar through the retainer buttons and secure to the lock body. Adhere the retainer buttons in the positions marked previously. With the door in the closed position, mark the position of the lock bar on the side of the guide. Transfer the location mark to the inside of the back face of the guide and drill and file a slot 10mm wide, 25mm long, equally spaced on the centre line of the guide. Allow approximately 5mm clearance from the top of the slot to the top of the locking bar. Check that the movement of the locking bars is free. Attach the guide locking bar hole cover to complete the installation. When you have completed your installation, ensure the site is cleaned and free of dirt and rubbish. Provide a short demonstration of how their new door operates, then present the customer with their owner's handbook and warranty. You have been watching a B&D training presentation. To view further titles in this series, or if you require any information in relation to this presentation, please contact your B&D representative.